Welcome back to the craft store. I'm John Cole-Morgan from the Beginner's Quilt Emporium, and today I'm going to show you how to make these fabulous little fabric baskets. The panel that I've used is a panel called Pamper from Macau, and I just loved this panel. And the great thing is that it came in these wonderful squares, and you can see you've got all these wonderful images of New York and patios in Paris and somebody's boudoir and a party. I just loved these, and it just gave me such a sense of fun. So what I did to start with was I took the panel, I cut up a piece of it, I took some leftover wadding, and I literally, this is just a scrap of wadding, I took some background fabric, put those together, and all I did was then quilted it. Now, I have a long arm quilting machine, so forgive me, I did use my long arm quilting machine on this, but it is so simple to do. That is exactly all you would do, and pop it through your sewing machine. Straight line quilting is absolutely fine. If you're really good at free motion, give it a go, give it a bit of a whirl. It's just such a nice way of being able to practice on a small piece of fabric to be able to make something that is really fun and very, very useful. So what we'll do is we'll just imagine I've used my sewing machine to do that right, and I've created 5 little squares like this. I've cut my squares up, and they're all the equal size. So if you don't have the panel and you want to do it, you just need 5 squares of equal size, 4 of which are going to be on the sides, and then you're going to have the bottom one at the base. Now this one you can have with the fabric pointing up, or you can have the fabric pointing down. That's your call entirely. It doesn't matter one way or the other. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to take 2 of them, you're going to put them right sides together, and you're going to stitch a seam all the way along there. But starting at the top, you go right to the very end. But when you get to the bottom, it is really important that you leave a 1/4 inch at this base over here. Because if you don't do this little 1/4 inch stop there, you're not going to be able to complete the Y seam. I know, I'm tricking you into doing a Y seam, but I promise you, when you see how easy it is to do, you're not going to be worried about doing it. So you're going to have 2 of these pieces, and I'm going to sew those 2 together like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew them together. So all 4 of my pieces will be sewn, and each and every one of them will have my 1/4 inch gap at the bottom. So be aware of that. Make sure you keep your 1/4 inch seam, and just keep that 1/4 inch at the bottom to be able to make sure that we can sew the base in without any problems. There we go. Now, I like to do a little locking stitch or a back and forth at the base there, because your fabric is going to take a little bit of maneuvering as you go around. Now, the other thing you're going to find is not all of your squares will be the same size, and that's okay. All that'll happen, you'll see I've got a little bit left over here. You're just going to take a really good pair of scissors, a nice strong pair, and you're just going to cut the excess off. And you can see as you get to the center there, it's all gone. So just take the time to make sure that everything is nice and square as you go along, and cut off whatever you don't need. I'm just sewing my 4th side down now and making sure I start right at the very, very top of my pieces, and I'm going to leave that 1/4 inch gap at the bottom to make sure I can keep that 1/4 inch seam to do my Y seams. And as I mentioned, oops, always the way. If, like me, your sewing machine ran away from you a little bit, that's absolutely fine. Just take your unpicker, pick back a 1/4 inch, and you are ready to go. There we go. I'm going to do a little locking stitch at that point as well, just because you will manipulate your fabric quite a lot at that point. Having a little locking stitch will just make your life that little bit easier. And anything that's going to make your life easier when you're doing a Y seam, embrace it, love it, and enjoy it. Now, I do have a lot of little threads left over here. Just get rid of those before you start. Now, some people want to go and put binding down the side of these. For me, I'm using mine as a thread basket, so I'm not too worried. But if you'd like to do binding all the way down the inside of these, go right ahead. Now is your time to do the sides. For myself, I don't want to do that. You can call me lazy, you can call me what you like. I just don't want to do it. There we go, so I'm not going to. Right, so I've now got the top is all perfectly lined up, all nice and straight, stitched to the top. And then when I get to the bottom, I've got these 1/4 inch flaps left over there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the piece that's going to be my bottom, and I'm going to pick a side. And that's the bottom side there, so I'm going to put the bottom side to here. And what you're going to do is you're going to maneuver the fabric down. So this is the piece that you're sewing on. This is the wall of your fabric box. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to line that up, and you can see that there, that lines up there and that lines up there. So when I sew, I'm going to sew from that 1/4 inch mark on this corner here, all the way along here to the 1/4 inch mark over here. And it's important you don't go past that 1/4 inch mark, because if you do, you're going to get your unpicker out, because you won't be able to get to the seam to do the next bit. And if you have to unpick, it's not a problem. We just take it nice and slowly and get the way through it. Now you have got quite a few layers here, so if you do have a quilting needle, now's the time to get it out. Pop that in, because you're going through so many layers of fabric here, and just take it slowly. If you've never sewn this many layers of fabric, that's absolutely fine. Most of us have got these little bits that come off our sewing machine. Most of you then can take that little bit out, and then when you're sewing this together, we're now doing the second side along, again exactly the same. You're lining up the edge of your fabric on the side over there and the edge of your fabric for the bottom, and exactly the same over here, edge to edge. And now you're going to do exactly the same, a 1/4 inch on this side, a 1/4 inch to the stitching all the way along to a 1/4 inch on there. Having taken this out, you will see you've got a little bit more maneuverability, because you haven't got that extra bulk of the plastic bit of your sewing machine over there. And again, 1/4 inch seam all the way along. And I just make sure I keep my tension on all the way along until I get to a 1/4 inch on this side over here. Having taken that piece of my sewing machine off, you'll see it's a lot easier to maneuver my sewing machine. And I then put another locking stitch in at that point, just because you will be maneuvering the fabric a little bit there, and out you come. So now we're halfway through. How easy is that? You've done this side, you've done that side, you've kept your 1/4 inches all the way along, and now we just do the other two sides over here. Lining those all up again, you're going to sew a 1/4 inch past the 1/4 inch seam there, all the way along there, and it'll be nice and simple, just like the last two rounds. And we're on to the last seam now, which is this little bit over here. Now you're at the position where you can literally line everything up, check that that works perfectly, and it doesn't matter now about the 1/4 inch gaps. You can just stitch all the way along there. It is absolutely fine. You're all done. And voila, that is how long it took to make that. And that is no time at all. Really, really simple process. Do get rid of your threads now, because if you're anybody like me, they just sit there. And if you've got a random thread in the middle of this, when it is your thread basket, you're going to be picking on it for ages. And there we go. Those are all my ends taken. And now all we do is you take your finger, you push on that corner, and you push on all the corners of the base. And you've got a pretty fabulous basket. Now, I'm going to put a binding on the top of this, only because I think it looks a lot neater. You'll see I've done one over here with a black binding, and the binding you can just machine sew on one side and then machine sew on the other. I wanted to have a little contrasting thread over there. It's that, or I couldn't find a black bobbin, you can decide. And then by doing that, you can have it that way. But if you wanted to have it a little bit shorter, and you didn't mind these popping out, you can just roll that down and your basket looks even more fab. I personally prefer a larger one, so that is going to be my basket when you've done it there. The binding, you're just going to take a 2.5 inch strip of fabric. I've chosen black, and all you do is you pop these on here. You're going to go raw edge to raw edge, so raw edge of your binding to the raw edge of your basket, and you're going to stitch that on all the way around. And of all the binding I've ever done, this is the one I like the most because it's quick and easy. And the great thing with this is if you've only got a 2.5-inch strip of fabric that you've not used before and you've got it in a collection that you really like, you could make a solid background and a base for your fabric box and then put a really beautiful contrasting binding on it. It is entirely up to you. The great thing with this is that your own creativity is the limit on this. You'll see my machine does have a needle down function. I think that that does help if you've got that function on your sewing machine. When you're doing this, try and keep the needle down. It just makes the whole process that little bit easier. Now, one tip, a bit like what I've just done here, try not to stitch too far and then you've got no space to do this. If you have overstitched the process, all you do is you unpick it a little bit and we get this ready then to finish off. Now, some people do straight line ending for their binding. That's what I'm going to do on this process here. And what you do is you fold your binding on this side to a point and you press that down. And then you fold this side to a point and you press that down. But now you need to go a 1/2 inch past that point. So this is the one side there, and this is the other. So you need to go a 1/2 inch past that point in order to have the seam allowance to be able to stitch those together without it working, or with it working properly. Now, pop that there, and you trim that off there. And then what you do is you're going to fold these together and you're going to stitch, sorry, I'm looking, you're going to stitch a 1/4 inch down this line all the way along. That's for straight edge binding. Both work. You can do the normal diagonal edge as well. Just give yourself a little bit of room to be able to play with it as you go along. And there we go. You then turn this back in, get rid of all your excess threads, press that back, and you're ready to finish your binding. I always stitch a little bit past where my binding started. You'll see I've got a double edge over here. I always stitch a little bit past just in case it comes undone. Now, the way you can do your binding now, stitching on the inside, you can double fold it and hand stitch it. That is entirely your choice. If you haven't got the skill or the need or the want, all you do is you fold that over as a single binding and you then stitch very, very close to the binding over here. You'll see over on this machine here, you're stitching just on the inside of this binding over here. Just on the inside, you'll see there's a thread stitch there. Just there you can see it. That's what I'm going to now repeat over here. And then on the other side, you've just got that wonderful contrasting thread. If you don't want the contrasting thread at this point, go and find yourself a black bobbin and the thread will be hidden in your binding. It's entirely your choice. And you just keep feeding the binding through to the other side, making sure that your needle is catching it on both sides. And as I said at the beginning, you just need 5 squares of exactly the same size to be able to make one of these. Interfacing is going to be key. If you're not going to be using a normal quilting wadding, a Bosal product or any bag making product that would make your fabric stand up and be secure, that would work absolutely perfectly. And as if by magic, you now have a finished fabric basket ready for you there. And I hope you enjoyed that very, very quick and simple tutorial from the craft store. I'm John Cole Morgan. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.